There's actually a memoir that I wrote, and it's called Primary and Secondary Contradictions in Seattle, 1967 to 1969, published in the Feminist Memoir Project, which details how I got involved in radical politics. It was a process. My parents, I was from a suburb north of New York City. I was raised in an all-white, affluent suburb, but my parents were civic activism, and I just hated affluent suburbia, and so I ran away. And in high school, I picketed Woolworths, and I was involved in demonstrations against the Bay of Pigs. My parents sent me to a very progressive private school, and I joined the Student Peace Union there, and then I went to Antioch College. So it was all a particular trajectory. I do love to tell the stories about what happened to me when I got to Seattle, because two things were really sort of cataclysmic. One was, in the fall of 1967, we noticed I had a lump on my breast. And we go to the doctor, and in those days you were in the hospital 2 nights, but the doctor told me the procedure with me and my husband and said that they do a biopsy, and if it's malignant, they basically tear out your whole right side. And I asked him, I said, well, why do you do it that way? Why don't you just sort of let me wake up and think about it? And he goes, we don't want you to think about it, you just got to get it done. And it made sense to me. So then when you have to fill out the form, they gave it to my husband. And even my husband was shocked, I was shocked, and we said, why? And the doctor said, and I will never, till the day I die, forget his words, and it was that women are too irrationally and emotionally attached to their breasts to make a wise decision. And so the law in Washington State was that if you were married, your husband got to sign away your breasts. And when I tell my students this, I go, and we know that men are certainly not irrationally attached to any parts of their body, but it's like my gynecologist, my radiologist, they cannot believe a world like that ever existed for women. And then at approximately the same time, I was an undergraduate in the history department, and I did very well. I was, in fact, I saw my transcript about 10 years ago. I had very high average. I was sort of going, God, I didn't think I did that well. But anyway, I wanted to apply for what was called a National Defense Education Authorization Grant. Got tuition, money for books, plus $5,000. Then it was $7,000, $9,000, and then $11,000. And this is in 1968. So this was a lot of money. And he was studying Russian history, and then he studied English history. So I went into the graduate office and said I wanted to apply for an NDEA, and they said they're not going to give it to women. And I said, why not? And they said because of the draft. They wanted to make sure that men got the priority. And I was active in the anti-war movement, but on the other hand, why shouldn't I be allowed to get a grant? I was certainly equally deserving. And I wrote in the memoir, I say, looking back, why didn't I, rip up the graduate department? Why didn't I beat up the doctor? But there wasn't a women's movement that could explain and give me voice and help me do something about it. So, but those were two very important incidences, which I think really shaped my consciousness, especially in terms of the women's movement.